All right, there we go. So please, you want to inform some people about when you joined the commission and a little bit about Southwest Gas, your background?
Sure. So my background really, I come out of the energy sector, spent 17 years at Southwest Gas. Started out as engineer one, worked my way up through regional manager during the recession back in 2007-ish, 2008. Primarily in my role at Southwest Gas, I was the regional manager overseeing what they called new business. So if you are new commercial, industrial, residential, multifamily, you needed natural gas, you went through my department. So I oversaw the sales department as well as engineering and construction. So it was a one-stop shop. But then when the recession hit and the housing bubble burst and there was no more new business, I was asked to move over to our government relations department. So I spent about 5 years in the government relations role, being the local liaison, being the liaison at the company between the company and local government. So anytime one of our construction crews did something stupid and got shut down, I'd go out to the city and apologize profusely, get our crews back up and running so that we could serve the customer. And likewise, if the city came out with an ordinance or something of that nature, I'd go in and try to get the language changed or some way either eliminated the ordinance or changed the ordinance so that it wouldn't impact the company's ability to work in the right of way in the cities. And so I did that for about 5 years, fell in love with local government and how local government ran, and decided that I was going to throw my hat in the ring for city council. So I ran for city council in Mesa and was elected in 2014. Sworn in 2015. I ran again unopposed and served another 4 years, so 8 years total, and was pretty much done with politics until the sneaky little corporation commission came into my purview. I was asked by some of our state legislators if I would run, and then I was recruited by Commissioner Myers to run with him as a team, and pushed forward a little bit by the one that I thought was going to rescue me, which was my wife, who thought it was a great idea for me to run for this office as well. So we hit the ground running, and we made it through the primary, a contested primary, and then as well as the general. And Nick and I were sworn in January this year. So we've been in office now for about 8 months.
So we're all very interested in the letter, and congratulations that you signed to look further into the development of some Western versions of RTOs. Right. And I really appreciated the update you did at Greg Patterson's meeting, and I'm sure they would welcome why you signed that. Sure.
Well, and it was, when I first got on the commission, Chairman O'Connor asked me if I would be on what they call BOSAR, which is the Board of State Regulators. So every state in the West, so it starts really with Texas. So you have Texas, New Mexico, Utah, Idaho, Arizona, California, Washington, Oregon, Montana, Wyoming, and I'm sure I'm probably missing somebody in there, but everyone has at least one commissioner from their state on BOSAR. And the one of the tasks that BOSAR is tasked with is looking at an RTO. And then you have another group that's also looking at markets and Market Plus. And so so I'm on BOSAR and tasked with looking at RTOs. And so I quickly realized that that the elephant in the room obviously is CAISO. And joining an RTO and allowing CAISO really to take over your generation and transmission. And so I think my second meeting on BOSAR, I said out loud what everyone else was thinking, which was there's no way in hell that Arizona is turning over generation and transmission to CAISO. And so I think, I think that as markets entered the conversation and, an SPP made a push, I think there was some concern from California's perspective of creating an artificial seam or maybe a real seam between California and the Western states if everyone shifted to a markets or an SPP type format. And so Governor Newsom went back to to the CPUC there and said, figure this out, figure out a way we can make this happen. And then I think all of you saw, the House bill, I think it was 532, that the legislature put forward to kind of address the governance issue around an RTO with CAISO. And, that bill got tabled. They had a lot of pushback from the labor in California and others. And so when that got tabled, that's when Governor Newsom kind of stood up and said, let's find a way to make this happen, even if we need to stand up a nonprofit organization to act as the governance board to make this happen. And so that's kind of where it's at now. So the letter that we signed was basically saying, look, we support continued discussions. The discussions have been basically where they've been at for, over a decade because nobody can agree on the governance. And so the letter was basically saying, let's set the governance piece aside and we'll address that when we get to that. But how else, what can we do to move the conversation forward? And that's what I'm after, because at the end of the day, in Arizona, our Constitution doesn't allow the commission to mandate our utilities move into an RTO or markets or SPP, right? So, but I want to make sure that at the end of the day, Arizona's at the table and has input, but B, I want to make sure that whichever direction our utilities decide to go, that it's not only the best decision for our utilities, but it's the best decision for the consumers across Arizona and for the citizens of Arizona. And so, we won't know that until we can have the discussions. And so that's why I signed on to the letter, because I think it's, as a commissioner, it would be prudent of me to have those conversations and figure out what are the barriers to entering an RTO. What are the barriers to entering a market? But if you're not having the conversation, then you're losing out on the benefits to the consumers. And it's my understanding there's a lot of benefits to the consumers of going into more of a regional sharing of assets and sharing of power. I mean, absolutely. I would love to take that cheap hydro out of Oregon and Washington State, and during our extreme summers. And likewise, I'm sure that Oregon and Washington would love to have some of our power during the winter, and when we're still wearing flip-flops and shorts. And so I think that regionalism is beneficial. I think it can help protect our grid, and I think it also has it'll help lower the prices of power. But we won't know that for sure until we go through the conversations and have those conversations.
Well, Commissioner, my understanding is when MISO in the Midwest, they were looking at forming an RTO, that a tool one of the commissions used was, like with all the studies that we have now, and I know you've seen some market-led studies and over $207 million of benefits per year to all Arizona citizens if we have some form, the benefits vary by which form of RTO. And so what they did in Illinois, I think it's Illinois, but it's in the Midwest, the commission said, we don't know the exact amount that the regulated utility is overcharging for transmission and ancillary costs, et cetera, by not being in MISO. But we do know that your rates are unreasonably high, given that you're not in an RTO. And I don't know if the commission has looked at tools you have to push a decision here, or where you stand on that.
Well, it's kind of, everybody's taken really an small incremental steps in moving it forward. I mean, the meetings that we're having right now with the Western states is really, it's meetings to figure out how to have meetings, right? And so I'm trying to get us, months down the road, because I'm more interested in what are those barriers, to market entry. I mean, I think we all know how to host a meeting. So we don't need to meet to meet. But they're adamant about taking small incremental steps, and kudos, to the group doing that, because, as you see PJM, as you see, MISO, I mean, all these older RTOs, they have flaws. And, and I think it's beneficial for our utilities, and it's beneficial for the consumers that we do move in a more coordinated and concerted effort, so that we can avoid some of the flaws that are in MISO and PGM.
Well, that's a good point. And I know I'll send the recording out, because I know you can't stay with us the whole time, but I know James with CEBA, in one of the comments that he'll be making is that the good news is we can take the best practices that fit in Arizona type RTO in the West and learn from that, because we have so much that we can learn from. So we are in a good position, not being a first adopter from that perspective. So.
Right. And there's some conversations going on right now that, of do we really need an RTO to go into a more regional sharing of capacity, and I don't think necessarily we need that, a full-blown RTO. Can we do it with the balancing authority, with an overarching balancing authority? Can we do it with, each state right now has a EIM? Can we have can that governing authority maybe be the EIMs coming together to help balance the market? I know that we got, I think Megan Decker and some of those are pushing on the resource adequacy program, and I think that's a huge effort, or not an effort, but that would be a huge piece of the puzzle as well, right? Because when you look back at PJM and you look at MISO, they haven't built any new generation in 20 plus years. And you can't tell me with the growth that, that people, the natural growth, the transition of people from one area to another, doesn't require generation. And so who's responsible for the generation? And that's, well, I guess one of my biggest concern is moving into an RTO. What's the incentive, other than if nobody's really paying attention on the resource adequacy side? What's the who's going to be responsible for building the new generation to ensure the resource adequacy versus just buying everything on the market, either financially or actual electrons. So there's a lot of conversations that got to take place. I know, I was just in a conference this past few days up in Washington State, where we talked a lot about transmission. You start getting into the transmission piece, and there's lots of transmission between Washington, Oregon, and California. Fairly decent between California and Arizona, fairly decent between Nevada and Arizona, but it's severely lacking between Arizona and Colorado and Utah and New Mexico and Texas. And so, it takes 16 years to permit and build transmission. And so, how are you going to build the grid to support regionalism? Because even, I have even concerns about SPP. If everyone moves to markets, you're limited on transmission from the East Coast coming in. And so with that limit, does that introduce unnecessary transmission? I just lost the word.
Constraints.
Yeah, I mean, constraints, right? I mean, and when you have that gridlock in the grid, when your transmission is, can't move as quickly as you need it, that artificially starts inflating the prices, right? Because you're trying to reduce the amount of power trying to be pushed, the transmission congestion, that's the word I was looking for. So, with transmission congestion, you increase the prices on your electric, on your kilowatt hours, so that you reduce the amount of power flowing through those lines, and it helps reduce the transmission. So if you don't have adequate transmission, does that inherently push the prices up to resolve a lot of your transmission congestion issues? So, there's tons of questions to be asked on both sides. I mean, you got GHG rules, you got tariffs, you've got, there's just so much that we have to talk about. I mean, we have problems in Arizona scheduling, natural gas for generation. We don't do day aheads here. And so until we can figure that piece out, we couldn't even move into a day ahead market. And so, there's all these issues that everybody's talking about, but they're talking about them in separate silos. And I think, this group, the Western States groups that's looking at an RTO, that's where I'm trying to move us, is let's stop having these conversations about resource adequacy in a silo. Let's stop having these conversations about GHG in a silo. Let's bring all of this together and have the conversation from a grander scale, because those are questions that are going to have to be resolved and answered before we know whether we can move to SPP or if we move to RTO.
Well, knowing your questions is very helpful. And I know among this group, I believe we have answers to the questions that you just raised, but you might have to listen to the recording. But before you have to go, I do want to allow Stacy to say something, because she's speaking next from the CAISO. And I do want to mention that part of the reason new generation doesn't have to be built as quickly is because of the additional efficiencies and economies when you share power differently in an RTO. That's right. Part of it. Yeah, right. And then there's players here, companies that then bring distributed local generation to tech companies and everything, so you don't have to transmit it, for the high voltage power systems as well. So there's a lot of different answers to your concerns that, again, this group would have. And I know Stacy's heard 1,000 times over about the concern with Cal governance to all the other states, but I just thought I'd give her a second to say something, and then let people ask you a few questions before you have to go grab something to eat or your long day ahead.
Sure.
Stacy, do you want to defend yourself?
Well, I don't know if I can defend myself, but certainly I just want to appreciate Commissioner Thompson's engagement in this, because it's really great to have your participation and have that voice, like you said, for Arizona. I think that's really important. So appreciate that you jumped in and have really engaged with all the commissioners that are asking the same questions and having these conversations. So appreciate it. I think we'll get into this, and certainly I would almost prefer the questions come from your team, because Commissioner Thompson and I can talk about this for days. But the governance issue, was brought up when we started the Western Energy Imbalance Market, and we developed a model where there is an independent board, the EIM governing body, that has shared authority over these real-time market rules. That was the compromise to any legislative change. And they do have shared authority. In fact, they had a board meeting, a joint meeting yesterday. I think they had 5 or 6 decisional items as joint bodies. And that's going well. It is, of course, not that pure independent governance over the markets, because our board of governors has that appointment by California. But the EIM governing body, I think, is they're asking good questions, and they're engaging with all of the Western utilities and stakeholders, and really doing their part to weigh in on these important issues. And if they don't approve it, it goes back to stakeholders, right? So it is a there is an element, it's not a sort of a veto authority, but there is a strong interest that both boards have to find consensus on these things. So with that said, I would love to take the questions, and then I'm happy to talk after. I know Commissioner has to leave, but good to see you.
One other comment I just wanted to make, and I know there'll be more follow-up in what's to come with the letter, Commissioner, and everything, but you know, having been very involved for a decade in procuring power in the wholesale market at APS Energy Services, and the companies know here very well, is you have to buy forward to hedge a price. And so the EIM is the last real-time moment, and then you have day ahead. Very helpful. Savings have been enormous, but you really need that robust forward market, which is, maybe there's a way to do it without an RTO. I don't know, but that might be worth some future discussion. But I want to make sure you get your questions in, you know, online and here before he has to go, because his time's about up.
I don't have a question, but just to the commissioner's point on generation not being built in MISO and PJM, generation is getting built in MISO and PJM. Yes, the queue right now is paused and coming out, but the queue positions that were before the pause and in an advanced position are indeed getting built. And the responsibility lies with the utilities. I mean, they have a requirement to have their capacity. And so most of the utilities are not going to be caught short, because then they're going to have penalties associated with that. So, I mean, EDR themselves, we've done a number of deals with utilities building generation in MISO and in PJM to meet their capacity needs and energy needs.
Thanks. Hey, Pete, you had a question?
Yeah, I think a question and a comment. Commissioner Thompson, thanks very much for taking the time and spending with us. I think, first of all, the comment, I think the idea about SPP developing an RTO West is really to you know, take over management of the existing grid and maybe build out the ties between East and West as it goes along, but it's not necessarily to use the generation resources in the East, and that transmission limitation is going to be what constrains how SPP operates RTO West. I think that's sort of the idea. I just wanted to kind of put that out there. And then the second question, the question I had, and it was really teed up by the comment that was just made. I'm very puzzled as to why there is this perception that capacity isn't being built in these RTOs, because we know that thousands of megawatts have been built. And so I'm just curious, where's that idea coming from? I mean, there's certainly a lot in the interconnection queues that, you know, she just commented on, but I'm really puzzled as to who is saying that that no capacity additions have been made in MISO and PJM, because that's simply not true.
Yeah, it's just articles that I've read, like the opinion pieces from the Wall Street Journal, talking about, you know, the PJM and the rolling blackouts that they were anticipated to have, and then comments that other people have made to me about PJM and some in MISO that haven't had new generation built. And so, you know, it's not something that I've really looked into. It's just really what I've read, either through op-eds or have heard in passing.
Well,
I don't think that op-eds are a good place.
but let's find a way to get you the answers you need, because he's got to go, and I want Rich to ask his question, and then we'll release him, and then hopefully we can provide answers and information to be helpful. Rich?
Yeah, thanks, Vicki. I wanted to show one of my slides to Commissioner Thompson, if I may, because he has to leave. I just have one slide I want to show him. I'll show everyone, but him in particular, based on his question. The issue of, yeah, I'll share my screen just real quick. Oh, you got to enable me. Whoever's in charge needs to
I think
enable
I
me.
gave you permission. Can you?
It says host disabled participant screen sharing.
I did? No. I thought I said all participants. No, it disabled itself. Okay. You should be able to do it.
Thank you.
And again, I will share the recording, but you're near the end, so people would have to get that far.
Yeah, so this is just one of my 5 slides, so you have to see a preview, but this is exactly what I think the commissioner was asking about. It's a calculation, it's factual data based. What we call this the generation effectiveness ratio is what we call this. And you can see that's defined as the incremental amount of summer capacity in megawatts percentage change divided by the amount that the consumption is going up in the region, again, percentage-wise, over this long period of time. And if you look at the 14 competitive states that allow competitive choice and have restructured their markets to allow that, and you pile them up into a big pile and you measure how much generation has been added divided by, their load growth, you get this 2.38 ratio. And in the monopoly states, including Arizona, those 35 of those states, you add those up and you compare it to the same ratio. And basically, they're almost the same size. I guess actually the competitive states have a slight amount more, but the point is power plants generation is being built even more so, slightly more so, but certainly equivalent to what they're doing in the monopoly states. And they're doing this as a function of market forces. Now, I know the previous speaker or the previous commenter said that the utilities are required, and that's true. In the monopoly states, the utilities are required to build the generation. But in the competitive states that allow choice, the utilities don't build the generation. It's the competitive market that does so, and that's what I have isolated here in the 14 states that allow choice. That's all being based as a function of the market. So generation is being built.
I really appreciate that, and we will come back to that too. But I mean, Commissioner, how do you want to get the answers to your questions? Because there's a wealth of information among the members and contributors here. And then we'll let you go.
And maybe this is Johnny Key. I actually would maybe put the question slightly different. We do have an open docket at the ACC that seems, this conversation is more lively than that conversation has ever been, in this open docket. Is there any interest from you as a commissioner or other commissioners from your understanding to have that docket have more life in it? Because we just haven't really seen any real engagement from the commission with that docket.
Well, I think so. I mean, we put the dockets out. I know, and others put dockets out, really to get the feedback. And, there's just so much on our plate right now that we're, all of us are going in all sorts of different directions, hoping to come back to the middle at some point in time and figure out where we're at. But, and all the Class A utilities coming in for rate cases this year doesn't help either. But, it's definitely, things that we need to look at. And so, I guess, Vicki, to answer your question, I would say, add to the docket, the areas. I mean, you and I have talked a few times about, retail competition and some other things. And I think, having some of those answers, moved into the document so that the entire commission and the staff can see the response. Because I know, one of the concerns that Commissioner Myers and I have had is on the stranded cost, and how do we handle that stranded cost? Because it's a big piece out there. I mean, I'm even concerned about the stranded cost with the closure of some of the coal-fired plants. And how do we deal with that? And the depreciation of and so forth. So there's tons of answers to questions that we need answered. And I think, anything that, if there's a narrative that you can write that helps answer some of those questions, I think that would be a really good starting point.
Well, thank you so much for your time. And I know Stacy's left a board meeting, so we're going to have to move to her, and we're happy to get you all the information you want that would be helpful. Thank you for
That
your
sounds
service.
great. Well, thank you all. And I wish I could stay on, as I'd love. And I got to meet with, oh gosh, man, my mind keeps going blank today because it's focused on the meeting downstairs.
Sure.
But I got to meet your CAISO president, had dinner with him the other night.
Elliot, yeah.
Elliot,
Good.
Elliot.
Yeah, said
I
he had
kept
a
wanting
nice
to say
time.
Eric. I kept wanting to say Eric, but I knew it wasn't Eric, so I didn't want to but yeah, Elliot, super informative, very nice gentleman. So give him my best if you see him, and thank you all again for taking time out of your day to get together and have the conversation. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you
right.
all.
Bye, thank you. Stacy, take it away, because I know you're also, we appreciate you fitting us in on this short time frame that you have.
Sure. And Vicky, you and I just were emailing back and forth. I want to make sure I am talking about the things that are most important to you all. I can talk a little bit about where we are with EDAM and the process there. I can also talk about just what California's been doing to add more resources to address the resource adequacy issues.
Both sound good to me.
Okay.
Both sound great.
Okay, I can touch on those pretty quickly for both. And thank you for having me, Vicky. It's good to see you all, and I appreciate the time. So just in terms of what California's been doing, I think, ever since August of 2020, when we had those rolling blackouts, it really was a wake-up call to say we need to be focused on getting adequate resources onto the system, recognizing that the methodology of accounting for resources needs to change as well, right? So what we need is in that net peak time, which is sort of after the load peak, but when the sun is going down, but it's still warm outside in the summer months, and we need energy in those critical hours, usually around between 6 p.m. and 9 p.m. And so over the past 3 years, the California Public Utilities Commission required, I think, and we have put on the system 12,000 megawatts of new generation. And I think about almost 6,000 of that is batteries, the 4-hour duration batteries. And that's really helped. And I think it's a recognition that, and I think this is what the conversation was happening around the West, is every utility will need to bring in adequate resources into the market, whatever market it is, whatever it looks like. And I think California is getting there. And I think to some extent, other utilities are going through that very issue right now. I know when it was so hot down in your neck of the woods, and even in Nevada, there was, they were relying on spot market purchases, and that was just really difficult. So I think that recognition has been helpful for our pool of resources in California, and the CPUC has an additional 18,800 megawatts ordered to be in place by 2028. So just a kind of an overview of the need for more resources. We're seeing that and recognizing their attributes, right? The attributes when we need them and how we need them, flexible resources in the afternoon, et cetera. In addition, we have really emphasized the need for transmission to get all those resources into the market. And so through our processes, the transmission planning process at the ACC, we just, our board approved about a $7 billion transmission plan that looks at about 45 different transmission projects to help that. So really emphasizing the need for both resources and transmission to be coming online together. And we're starting to plan those better together, right? It's not a separate resource plan and a transmission plan. You really need to think about those things together. And then in addition, as you may know, that the California legislature and governor approved the concept of a strategic reliability reserve. And those, again, are units that would be needed only in the cases of emergencies, and typically either gas or diesel or other aspects, including demand response as well, to really help in those critical hours as we're getting more resource adequate. And things have changed. What happened this summer is almost sort of the opposite of what happened last summer in terms of where the heat was and where the resources were going. And so last summer, we were importing a lot more energy. This summer, we were exporting a lot more in those critical hours. And that's just the nature of what's happening with both the weather and the set of resources in the West. I think that is okay, right? I mean, we are becoming more and more reliant on each other around the West because those resources are further apart, and they are the geographic diversity is so beneficial, right? It really does help if there's a storm or a monsoon or a heat wave in one area and there's not in the other. So I think we're becoming more interdependent. And that leads into the EDAM. Certainly, we've seen success with the real-time market, the Western Energy Imbalance procurement in terms of those resources. So really successful. And I think that led to people saying, how about the day-ahead market? And Vicki, your point, that is the day-ahead market. Yes, it's not real forward like RA, but it gives you the chance to start resources and recognize what you need that next day. And there's a lot of value there. There's a lot of value in seeing what the region is going to need that next day. And you can really take best advantage of the resources you have in the market. So we did go through a big stakeholder process, and we filed tariff changes to FERC in August, and we are requesting a December decisional date. We'll see how that goes. And I know stakeholders are putting in their comments, I think, this week to that process, and we hope to be able to get that decision in December. Pacific Corp and the balancing area of Northern California have agreed to participate, and others are nearing their decision point later this fall. So happy to see that. We had a forum down in Las Vegas where Commissioner Thompson was on a panel of other regulators talking about this. They also talked about that letter and the initiative, the West-wide Governance Pathway Initiative, which is now, for all of those who don't know, it's now posted on the Western Interstate Energy Board website. And it's being managed by Carl Linville and Jennifer Gardner, both very experienced in this discussion. They were both served on the EIM governing body at different points. And both the letters that the commissioners put out, as well as all the stakeholder comments, are being posted on that website. So you can see where that is going to go. We, of course, are in part the subject of that letter because I think the California commissioners realize that having California in the market is an important part of seeing that success. And so we're mentioned in there. We're going to be in just a supportive role, but not in the driver's seat by any means. We did supply comments, but they were just very general in nature. And we look forward to seeing where that goes. I think the door is open to whether this would yield the need for legislation in California. They haven't foreclosed that. And even though it's a different concept, this sort of separate entity, I think, as the legal analysis is being conducted, and as we know more, that might be revealed as well. So I'll stop there, and I'm happy to take questions if I didn't address anything that you wanted to hear about.
Questions? Go ahead, Shelly.
What's the difference between an RTO and a balancing authority? This sounds similar to me, but I heard Commissioner Thompson say might be, maybe a balancing authority would be adequate. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, there's the balancing authority is responsible for matching supply and demand. It's really a compliance obligation through NERC, the National Electric Reliability Corporation. And so it's just fundamentally matching supply with demand and holding your frequency stable to serve your particular footprint, right? So right now there's 39 balancing areas in the West, and each of them are held up to compliance standards to meet their supply and demand. There is benefit to combining balancing authority functions. You have sort of the benefit of sort of a single compliance center where you can match that supply and demand, of course, with that diversity being helpful. But there's no market function inherently in a balancing authority. So you add the market function and the transmission planning function, and that would give you an RTO in very simple terms. The RTO adds the idea of a market and the transmission planning function.
Is there a final question for Stacy? Because I got to keep this moving for the other speakers to have some time and to get her back to her board meeting. Any other questions? Okay, as always, we appreciate your efforts and time and whatever this group can do to help. We do have a lot of answers, and I don't know how to get them, to the people that need to know them, but we'll figure it out.
If you're finding that you can't find the right funnel, I'm happy to help and either steer you to the right people, or however, if I can help you. But I know you all have great experience and perspectives. So thank you for letting me join you.
Thank you.
Okay,
All
take care.
right.
Bye.
Bye. All right, James, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, and thank you for waiting a couple minutes, and tell us about CEBA and what you're doing in North Carolina.
Absolutely. Really appreciate it. It was great to listen to a lot of the discussion with the commissioner, and really appreciate all the questions. Also want to thank some of our members for CEBA for participating today in person and as well as remotely. And I am the senior associate for the Clean Energy Buyers Association, covering the Carolinas. And I'm part of our Southeast team. And so I will be I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I'll be presenting on, there we go. And let's go ahead and do from the beginning. And I think is it working? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So yeah, so I specialize in the Carolinas is what I use my research area before I joined CEBA. For those of you who are not, I'm sure many of you are, but for those who are not, CEBA is an association of large clean energy customers. Our membership covers 380 companies, 7 trillion in revenues, and 17 million employees. Our members include stakeholders from the commercial and industrial sector, nonprofit organizations, as well as energy providers and service providers. All of them are committed to clean energy in some way. But yeah, it is what's really impressive about CEBA is the diversity of our membership.
James, if you want to click got it, do you see that on your, because I can't do it. And if you change your display settings, it'll just focus on the one slide you're on, but we can.
Okay, let me.
You got to click the got it down there.
I could see the presentation great. Let me, yeah.
Set it up as set up slideshow, click the top.
All right, so let's go to, is it
That's
under,
what I'm
this is
telling
under
you, it's
Zoom?
hysterical.
Literally going through my mind. Look at Ruby.
Current slide, want to click on the current slide all the way on the left?
Yeah, there you go.
Okay,
Thank you.
how is that? Okay, can you all see the about CEBA slide?
We can see it, it's fine.
Okay. I was
Sorry,
actually
no, James, we cannot see the about CEBA slide. We are seeing the first slide of
Only?
forms in the
Oh.
Carolinas.
Oh, yeah, I wonder why.
That's all you're seeing. Okay.
That's all we're seeing. We see it very small on the left-hand side in the number 2 position about CEBA.
Okay. So, okay. Interesting. Last view keeps.
Which button do you want?
This one down here.
Okay, he's
Here to-
pointing to if you look at the bottom right before the 56%, there's like a little desk and Mike says to click that.
Looks like a podium.
Looks like a podium.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, on the bottom for the right.
Yeah, you're almost there. Go a little bit to the left with your cursor. Yeah. Oh, well.
There you go. Now we see about CEBA. Oh, no.
It has actually been quite some time since I have most of my presentations are internal, and so I've had to relearn Zoom.
Click on it. Yeah, there you go.
We're just going to do it this way instead of
Yeah,
trying
fine.
to. Yeah. And I'm going to go ahead and move on to, in the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and start talking about the Carolinas. I love that question about balancing authorities, by the way, because I think that there's absolutely a spectrum of knowledge in today's conversation. So I'm really glad that someone asked the question. It's a term that you can have people who spend years studying energy and they're not familiar with balancing authorities. I've definitely seen that myself. And for your reference, we have in North Carolina, we have 3 vertically integrated investor-owned utilities who are providing a majority of the service to customers in North Carolina. And so it's really 2 if you think about it, but you have Duke Energy, which used to be Duke Power, and then when they acquired Progress Energy, they never combined the 2 separate balancing authorities into one in the Carolinas. They kept them separate to this day, and so you have Duke. which is, the two sides. And then you have part of Dominion, Dominion, North Carolina in the Northeast, which is part of PJM. And so
let me just add something here. Yes. The reason this is relevant is Arizona, if you had Duke, there and is that Dominion? Anyway, that's like SRP, APS, TEP, we're like that, which is not like an RTO, but CEBA is trying to be a catalyst to move it forward. So that's why he's speaking on this.
Great.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. I joined today to talk about what's going on in the Southeast, and it's actually I will get back to North Carolina in a moment, but I wanted to move on to South Carolina because in many ways there's actually at the moment it appears there's more momentum in South Carolina than in North Carolina, but the two really need to move together. The biggest difference between there's a couple differences. Duke Energy has a presence in South Carolina, and also because of where they are, they're an important player in terms of transmission off neighboring assistance from a neighboring system like in Winter Storm Elliott. The biggest difference is that you have a publicly owned utility, Santee Cooper, in South Carolina, and they encountered a lot of financial difficulties with trying to expand the VC nuclear plant in 2017. The project ultimately failed at a cost of $9 billion to ratepayers, and so that provoked the General Assembly in South Carolina to commission the consulting firm Bridal Group to look at the benefits of introducing market reform in South Carolina. And so for those of you who may be familiar with the Bridal Report, this is where I'm going. And the conclusions or the recommendations from the Bridal Report were 4. And so it was looking at a range of wholesale market options for South Carolina. And so one is joining a joint dispatch agreement in South Carolina to form a sort of regional power sharing agreement. The other option was to form an EIM to balance production and delivery in real time. And then the next option was to look at forming a regional transmission organization. And the two options that they discussed were joining PJM or forming a new one. Of course, the Bridal Group's main conclusion was that it would be logistically easier and it'd be faster to join PJM, the cost is less. But I did want to mention that in terms of where CEBA is on this issue, all of my comments, by the way, are pertaining to the Southeast. That's because that's what I cover. CEBA has no preference whether the Carolinas join PJM or if they invest in forming an RTO that's not part of PJ, that's their own. But I thought that point was important to emphasize. And but the other point I wanted to make is that South Carolina, again, moving back to South Carolina, really can't move on their own. They really need what they can do will be significantly influenced by what happens in North Carolina, given how much of Duke Energy's two balancing authorities in North Carolina extend down into South Carolina, as well as the fact that they're between South Carolina and PJM. And so I'm going to move on in my time.
I just had a clarifying question there, James, because this is interesting. On the prior slide, the 600 million savings, is that what kind of a organized market is that Battle Group study based upon that's different than the 285 million? That's just because North Carolina is a whole state.
Mm-hmm.
If it had a statewide RTO.
I actually will have to go back. To be honest, okay. I need to take that question for the record and get back to you.
Okay, that's fine.
On whether which option that was.
Mike knows. Yeah. Mike knows. Mike's going to offer the answer.
Thank you.
So I followed the South Carolina development on behalf of our street, and so the 600 for North Carolina, or the 85 to 362 million a year for South Carolina. Those are the estimated benefits for joining a full RTO.
For the
Mhm.
state.
Yeah, well, so, yeah, so if they join with the existing market PJM, if they just.
Oh, it's if you.
If it
they
was an
join-
expansion
Oh,
of
okay,
PJM.
they joined PJM, okay.
The slightly lower estimate is if they form their own RTO, it's a little bit lower just because there's so much expense involved.
Sure.
And it takes longer to set up a new one than it would if they could just expand down,
Mhm.
as an addition to PJM.
Very good.
But yeah, but those are like full RTO participating. They're not just single state RTOs, but they're part of a mid-Atlantic, and Atlantic seaboard.
Okay, that's what I was thinking. Okay, very good. Thank you. Okay, James, continue to your last slide.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, and so in North Carolina, the momentum there is momentum, and we're definitely engaged. There's a bill HB 503, and it would commission a legislative study committee to evaluate wholesale market options. And it would look at the benefits across a range of options, from joining an existing wholesale market, or as we mentioned, forming a regional partnership with South Carolina. It leaves the text leaves a lot of room for what that could actually look like if it's some type of arrangement such as an EIM that is short of an RTO. Because the General Assembly is more or less ended business except for approving a budget in North Carolina this year. However, there is a short session, and because HB 503 will require some appropriations, it's eligible to be brought up in the short session in 2024 in the spring. And so we're currently in conversations with our partners in North Carolina regarding what is the best approach for our next steps in Q1 of 2024. And so that's my synopsis of where we are in the Carolinas right now. But I really appreciate getting to participate. I'll happy to hear from additional questions and comments.
James, we really appreciate it. And yes, we know you're new, so you jumped in fully. But I thought what was interesting about this was that the large buyers got momentum to cause some more forward action on an organized wholesale market solution. And because it's important to what they want, and from an economic development perspective in the state, et cetera, you want to create the environment that attracts great businesses, and their laws there are a little bit different because their commission's not a fourth arm of government under the Constitution, but the legislative venue was the one to go to cause the accelerated attention on the RTO there. So I just
very unique in the sense that a very small portion of North Carolina is actually in PJM. So I feel like that gives it a little bit of a flavor or a taste. But then the value that CEBA is bringing is CEBA is reaching out to its broad membership base and saying, who's going to come and, put their name behind this and the push there. And I think, this in the sense that, CEBA has to balance what markets they're going to participate in because of the limited dollars and, Freeport and DPR are members of CEBA, and so we have say in how that money is allocated with the resources. But I think in Constellation as well. But definitely, if there is a big push, like I think those are things that CEBA can bridge and help. And I think that John, you and I can probably be advocates as well. If there's a real
opportunity. I wanted to introduce one of my favorite people in the world, Heidi Ratz, who's on the call, who, while James specializes in Southeast, Heidi is really the CEBA point of contact for, maybe not the point of contact anymore, Heidi, I'm not 100% sure.
Picture of her?
Yeah, picture there. Heidi, if you want to come off mute.
Hi, Heidi.
But covers the West and helps run the West working group, which we spent a lot of time talking about organized markets.
Sorry to crash your call and sorry to stay off camera. I originally was going to be in a dentist appointment at this time and it got canceled. So I was able to hop on really quick and hear James' presentation on what we're doing in the Southeast. But thank you, Johnny. Yes, we do have a core group of large energy buyers in the West who have been really active on RTO expansion. So myself working with our new manager, Angie Dykema, and we have an associate helping as well. And we've been engaging in the day ahead markets. We've been talking to commissioners, and I'm happy to provide any background on what we've been doing in the West.
Yeah, I think Heidi, maybe one of the takeaways is making sure that CEBA can give the RTO information and aggregate that as a whole for the commissioners. Like, for example, on what's being built, and to answer some of these questions to help you know, with the resources, is that something that CEBA can commit to?
Yeah, can you tell me again, can you tell me a little more what you mean by aggregating information?
Well,
I think I can speak to it a little bit, Heidi. I believe CEBA was one of the very few groups who submitted comments into the docket, trying to just pull together lots of information and put it into the RTO docket in Arizona. I believe CEBA did file comments. Is that correct, Heidi?
Yes, we did. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so we have been, West Working Group has been active in that docket. So that docket that we asked the question about whether or not the commissioners want engagement in that docket or not. Which we haven't.
Yes.
Well, but
Yeah.
in order to get engagement, you have to have workshops, you have to have reasons for putting information in that will then be discussed through like a workshop process.
And we can talk about that at the end, because we're all here together sharing information to move this forward. So what's the best, wisest use of resources to do so? I do want to honor time. The good news is I had 20 minutes at the end saved for questions. And since we're asking them on the way, even though we're 10 minutes behind, we're still fine. So to lower everyone's angst here. But if we can move on, I'm going to have Mike Giberson introduce himself. And we found his Daily Star article of great interest. So why don't you give a little background and take it away?
Yeah, so,
Oh, do you want me to pull your slides up?
you know, I wrote that, well,
You wrote them, that's
fine.
fine. I think you also
I might
gave me.
rather look at the slides and look at us, so.
That's CEBA's, never mind that one. Okay, go ahead.
So introduce myself at the beginning of the meeting, but for some of those that joined, so I'm Michael Giberson. I'm a senior fellow in energy with the R Street Institute. R Street is a Washington DC based think tank. Although I'm based out here, kind of out here in Phoenix, and so this is a so it's a local issue for me. Moved out here after retiring from Texas Tech University a couple of years ago because I've got family, particularly grandchildren in the area. So a year and a half ago, or 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago now, the Arizona legislature stripped out the pro-competition language that's in the that was in the Arizona state law. Some of the legislatures, just before they voted in favor of monopoly, wanted to sort of defend their pro-market reputations, and so they said, "Well, this whole law, it might be headed, it might be a good idea, but we need to take a fresh look at competition, retail competition." The outdated law needs updated. So since then, they repealed the pro-competition language. They haven't done much in the way of taking that fresh look yet, but now is a good time for it. So 25 years ago, retail choice, particularly in market competition, was kind of a grand experiment. I mean, there was a lot of ideas about what would work or could work or might work, but it was a little bit risky and things could go badly. And in fact, California showed us, yes, things could go badly in retail choice because their design, failed spectacularly once it got under stress. So, 25 years ago, it was a risky business. It was a kind of an experiment. But when California failed, lots of states, including Arizona, decided maybe it wasn't worth the risk. But 13 states and the District of Columbia, so 14 jurisdictions, stuck with it, stuck with retail electric choice. And we now have 20 to 25 years of experience of it working in states. And so it's no longer a risky experiment to think about retail choice. It's it's been working, better or worse, but we have real live examples to look at. So we don't have to guess. We don't have to talk about what might happen or could happen or should happen. We can just look at what has happened and then say, well, okay, Arizona's a little bit different from these other states, but we can figure out what's going to work here, what can work here, and how it will work here. We don't have to take a big leap into the unknown. So,
yeah, there we go.
oh yeah. So, did just at the end of August have an op-ed that appeared in the Arizona Daily Star about retail competition, arguing in favor of this, taking a fresh look. There were really sort of two bits of substance in that op-ed. One is there was this new report that came out right at the end of July, put out by the Retail Energy Advancement League, a report written by a former Massachusetts state regulator who sort of assesses this 20 to 25 years of experience and sort of reports the good and the bad, and tries to put a kind of a balanced look at the experience, right? So this report is pretty good. It's in depth. It has lots of information to it, and it makes it easy to start that fresh look, right? I mean, they've already done sort of the initial groundwork on a fresh look at retail competition.
And Mike, Richard's going to share the RESA data similar to what's in that report. But I've got to say, Brian Cole, I apologize. I jumped over you, but we'll get you on real quick here as soon as you're done.
So
Yes,
now REAL is a trade association, right? It's a bunch of companies that are in the business of retail electric supply or energy supply. So read the report with skepticism if you want. You can check the figures. But it's pretty good. It's pretty good. The other part of the other thing I did in that op-ed was trying to address sort of three main objections, sort of the first three hurdles you have to get over to get someone to think about retail electric choice. So people say California, right? Especially in the West, especially in Arizona, right next door. People say, look, they tried this in California and it failed spectacularly. And it cost them a lot of money. We don't want that to happen. But so it's true, right? Failed spectacularly. None of the 14 other states, the 14 jurisdictions nobody copied California's way of doing things, and they've got 20 years of experience, and they haven't failed spectacularly, right? They're still going on. They're working. So Arizona, if it chooses retail choice, is not going to copy the failed California. It's going to look around and see what works, right? So California was a disaster, but it's not going to be our disaster. We're not going to do it that way. People argue that reliability will fall with retail choice. Again, this is not a well-founded concern. One thing is most consumer interruptions, most reliability problems are local distribution wire. A windstorm comes through, a thunderstorm in Arizona, a monsoon comes through, and sometimes the wind and rain will just take down a power line for a neighborhood or for part of town. Other places, it's a hurricane or it's tornadoes or whatever. But with retail choice, local distribution wires and transmission grid remain part of the regulated system. So it's that big reliability risk to customers still is part of the regulated system that remains directly under supervision of the state, the Arizona Corporation Commission. And in addition, the federal regulators has jurisdiction over the bulk power system reliability, so transmission grids, and so again, regulators have oversight, and state regulators also continue to have some responsibility. So a great portion of the industry where the reliability is of most concern remains largely under regulatory oversight. The corner that then gets interesting is with resource adequacy. And, you know, again, those are areas where there's been lots of focus. Different states are doing things different ways. There's you know, again, learning there. But again, we haven't seen the big reliability fail 2 years ago in Texas. The people will often cite Texas now as evidence again for that retail choice is a bad idea. But nobody who's studied the effects of Winter Storm Uri in Texas, you know, pins the failures on retail electric choice, right? There may have been bulk system problems. My view is that it just was a storm that was so far outside of planning that nobody was ready for it. But again, we can, you know, we can look at what happened there. Nothing that happened in Texas in 2021 resulted because of retail choice. And then finally, people say, well, retail prices will skyrocket with retail choice. So there's a academic study that's going to be published shortly in the Energy Journal, one of the major energy economics academic journals, that's taken a very detailed look at prices and retail competition. Probably, I mean, it's probably, there have been a number of efforts. This one is probably the best. And so Rose, Carafelli, and Upton are the authors. I can find it if someone's interested, just, you know, send me an email. But basically what they say is, you know, if you average all the retail choice jurisdictions together and you compare them to what their prices would have likely been if they stuck with regulation, you know, it sort of turns out after about 10 years or so, they don't see much difference, right? Prices aren't any higher, they aren't any lower, they're about where they would be on average, you know, had they stuck with regulation, right? So yes, retail choice was sort of premised. One of the promises was that it was going to drive prices down. It seems not to have done that. But this is kind of a glass half full, half empty kind of result, right? You say, well, okay, it hasn't pushed price down, but you can also say, and it's no worse than regulation. So, you know, so what are regulators doing if they're not any better than what the market would do in keeping prices down?
And we will see some data on that in the RESA presentation coming up.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And so it turns out that, you know, on average, no, prices aren't skyrocketing. They're about the same as what they would have been probably in some of the most detailed analysis. But the interesting thing is that that's the on average story. If you dig under the average, it's like not every state, not all 14 states with retail choice did things the same way. Texas has a reputation for being sort of going furthest in its setup. Other states were a little more cautious, built in, you know, a few more safety nets or whatever, and have not gone as far. Well, looking at the same academic study at the state level results, and you see states like Texas and Pennsylvania, which also has a reputation for having a pretty good retail market, they show pretty clearly that prices are a little lower in those states than their estimate of what the prices would have been had those states stuck with regulation. On the other hand, particularly in the New England states, those states are higher than the estimate of what the prices would have been under regulation, but probably not because of retail choice, more likely because of the failure to build sufficient gas pipeline infrastructure. Pennsylvania and Texas were well positioned to benefit from access to cheap natural gas because of hydraulic fracturing. That's largely, New England has largely been cut off from that cheap natural gas because of limited gas pipeline infrastructure, right? So prices are higher there, but probably not because of retail choice again. So, you know, again, we can dig into these questions at length. I used to warn my students that, you know, they could come ask me questions about economic policy whenever they wanted to, but they should be warned that I can talk for a long time. Just briefly then, retail choice works best with a competitive wholesale market. And so, I mean, Arizona, as we talked about, is already, you know, exploring with the rest of the West, possibility of an RTO or maybe 2 RTOs or maybe something else, right? Maybe some new arrangement that captures benefits and avoids, whatever concerns people have with going to an RTO. So I don't know, we want to have active wholesale competition in the West, whether it's RTOs or something else, that's worth exploring. But you get the most out of retail choice with active wholesale competition. You get the most out of active wholesale competition with active retail choice. So, this is, we want both.
So no mystery what your view is. So, but what I'm going to do is, if we can, hold questions for Mike until after RESA presents their data, because I think we'll find some similarities there, or if there's differences, we can then address it. Because I skipped over Brian, and I want Brian to have a few moments here to share APS's view on RTOs wholesale, and if you want to address any of Mike's comments, or as others speak, if you can stay on, that'd be fine too. But Brian, why don't you take the floor here?
Thanks, Vicki. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Hey, and I'm going to try to be as brief as possible, both for you all who are behind schedule, but for myself, because I've got another meeting I'm supposed to be in as well.
Sorry.
So I will try to go quickly. I know I updated you all on where APS was in the market space a while back. This will be a little bit of an update. I wanted to give you kind of an overview of what the WMEG studies told us and what those results were. First of all, though, I want to make sure that I remind everybody APS's goals in this whole thing as far as market steps are: number one, reliability; number two, customer cost savings; and number three, clean energy integration into the future. So that's our foundation. The WMEG study, if you recall, was a group of 25 entities, including ones from every state in the WEC, including California, where LADWP and Bank was a participant. And that study recently concluded. And so we have been putting together some results and trying to share those results. The overall takeaway from the study is, in all of the different scenarios and footprints that were looked at, the savings for APS and Arizona customers were there. So they're not gigantic, but they are savings, and they are in all scenarios. So that's good news. The good news is we should be moving in that direction. And I'm going to pause for a second because the room seems frozen to me, so I don't even know if you're hearing me.
Oh yeah, we're good.
Okay. Okay, it's just a video thing. Okay, good. So we showed savings in all scenarios, which says we should continue moving forward into a day-ahead market. We continue to evaluate both the CAISO EDAM option as well as the SPP Markets Plus option. The study that went on under WMEG very clearly was a production cost study only. And has been mentioned by a couple speakers earlier, there's also a generation investment cost savings that can occur depending on your resource adequacy, resource sufficiency. How does generation get built, right? You've got to make sure that you understand how that's going to work. We see the foundation of that in the West as being RAP, which was also mentioned, which requires entities to come to the table with a certain type and amount of resources in order to come into the market adequate in the first place, so that there's no leaning going back and forth between entities. So we see that as the reason to get there. And then if you can couple it with a market, then you can make it even better. And so all of that's good. The WMEG studies showed for us that we benefit in all markets, in all market footprints, but we did benefit more in market footprints where we were in the SPP side. Now, before anybody jumps to any conclusions, that does not mean we've made any decisions to go to SPP. What it means is we believe that we're doing the right thing and continuing to build out the Markets Plus option to see it as an alternative and as an option in a day-ahead market as we go forward. So we will continue to do that and continue to push forward in getting a tariff filed with SPP, as well as protocols, just like CAISO is doing as they just filed their tariff, and then they'll be doing some additional protocols as well. So again, making this very brief, I'm going to summarize kind of everything all at once. Importantly, the study showed that, as you would expect, a single footprint in the entire WEC saves the most money from a global perspective. However, very importantly, when you look at the individual utility results, they're not shared equally. And in fact, in a large footprint, California is the biggest beneficiary, and the rest of us actually in aggregate have a cost increase. And so there's a clear beneficiary in the way that works. And then when you split a footprint and you look at a footprint that has all of California and Pacific Core, and everybody else is in a different market, the rest of us that are in a different market actually have significantly more benefits, and California's benefit goes way, way down. And so most of the cost is incurred there. So what that says is California really needs the rest of the West more than the rest of the West needs California. That's an important takeaway from this study. Doesn't matter. We are going to continue to push forward with both markets, both options, continue to work with both of them to make them each the best option they can be before we make any decisions. But it does, the study does reinforce the fact that we need to build out SPP Markets Plus as an alternative. From production cost savings, it does look like it's beneficial to be in a market with SPP rules and engagement, and also a market that includes the Northwest. So Northwest-Southwest diversity shows up very critically, which shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. Overall production cost savings going to a day ahead from where we are today, relatively modest, but even modest is still millions of dollars, so they're important to our customers. I did want to address the fact that seams has come up a lot, as we can't do the split footprint because of seams. And the reality is seams are addressed everywhere around this country in a relatively good manner, and there's ways to mitigate that. The study also did a sensitivity on a seams issue, and what it showed was instead of a cost increase of $250 million in a poorly managed seam in a split footprint, as I described, you could reduce that by $150 million just by reducing the friction around that seam. And so what that says is it really incents all of us to make sure that that seam is negotiated in the proper way and benefits all of our customers. In fact, most of the benefits of that reduction from the 250 million to 100 million goes to California. So that really would say that it would be in their best interest to come to the table and negotiate a good seam. So that's a very important takeaway as well. And then lastly,
Ryan, is that in the WMEG study, these numbers?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
And we are, by the way, going to be docketing that study in both the RTO docket as well as the IRP docket. So if you all are going to look for it next week there, we will have it docketed.
Good. Okay, thanks.
And then just last thought, again, I've said it several times, no decisions have been made. We're going to continue to look. Production cost savings are just one piece of the puzzle, right? So resource adequacy is important. We think RAP is the right foundation for that. We'll be analyzing what's the future potential of a market footprint look like. What's the benefits in the long run versus the short run, assessing transmission connectivity to a larger degree to see what additional benefit we could get with additional build out of transmission. And then looking at finalization of those market tariffs and critical business practices. So I know that was very fast, and I apologize for speaking so quickly, but I can take a question or two, but I really do need to jump.
Yeah, that was my fault, Brian. But just to be clear, because I want to make sure, so APS is looking at a full RTO, not like some just stopping at EIM or EDAM or having a bigger balancing authority cooperative agreement. You're committed to looking at a full RTO. It's just
so Vicky, I think the right words to use are we are looking at everything up to and including an RTO. So we are not fully committed to an RTO, nor are we eliminating an RTO. Okay. We want to do whatever's in the best interest of our customers. And as I said in my kind of opening statements, if it meets reliability, customer cost savings, and helps us with our clean energy, then we're going to keep moving. So We'll take it step by step with the rest of the West, but right now we're focused on getting to that day ahead market as the next step.
And so just one other thing, and I want to make sure somebody else might get in a question before you have to go. Is the Northwest also, the study concludes that they would benefit more by having California just be its own RTO?
Yeah, I don't know that I'd characterize it as benefit more by California being on its own. It's just more of a, I think, realization of there's a really good diversity between the Northwest and Southwest that the Southwest does not necessarily have with California that makes that system look better. So, and I'd say from an individual result standpoint, so what the report will show is aggregate results. It'll show WMEG, non-WMEG, but it cannot show individual company results. I'm providing that to you because I own those. That's the way the study was done. And so each individual entity that was a WMEG member that participated in that study, not everybody did, owns those results and is free to share those with the public, which we are doing.
Thank you. Anyone
You bet.
else? Nobody? Okay, Brian, well, keep up the
Okay.
good work. Okay, thank you so
Okay.
much.
Thanks for
All
the
right.
time. Have a great day all.
All right, so we've got 25 minutes. Doug can take it away. Shelly, you've got a few comments, and then we'll have some time for questions for either you all or.
See Richard speak first.
Oh, but I thought you were going to introduce the.
I'd let him go first, though, because I think his data is more important.
Okay. All right. Well, I would set it up that Richard, if you want to show your slides, this is in support in part of the docket where Doug's the attorney for RESA that has been sitting, well, he's asked that it be reignited is the word I would pick. Re-energized. I like it. Okay, so Rich, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So I already showed one of my 5 slides earlier when the commissioner was with us. So,
If anybody else is, just me.
can you hear me okay?
He's a little slow.
It's a little muted, Richard. I don't know.
Where's the,
Do you need to be closer to your mic?
here we go.
All right, hold on a second.
Is that too long? Yeah. Which one of these is quality? There we go. Let's see if this will help. Okay, say something.
Talk, Richard.
Like mute him?
Oh, yeah, yeah, you can move the arrow to the. You can make it louder, Vicky. I just saw the. Good. First one was lunch, now.
My second lunch. No, I skipped lunch. I needed to.
I'm gonna have a cookie in honor of his cookies. Well, the picture's frozen, so we can just get up and have cookies.
So it says your default speakers changed to headphones, so I'm not sure if that's. Maybe if you just talk louder, Rich, we'll be fine. Uh-oh.
This is.
Now you're frozen.
What's going on here? I don't know what to do. You're my tech guy.
It's not you. It's him.
Okay, you're gonna have to deal with it, Rich, but it looks like we're frozen.
But everybody's going.
Yeah, you're healing his screen.
Zoom is not responding. That's muted.
Well, I don't know because I don't have control of the,
No.
We're seeing it on his.
Oh, it's on-
yeah, Rich, it's on your side. I don't know if you can hear us. I don't know if I should restart the whole thing. Oh, he's gotta come back on. Are you with us? Oh, good. Rich? Is,
Anyone?
You must have dropped off coming back, maybe.
We can still hear you on the line, but I think Rich is frozen and probably trying to get back in. So just so you know that you're at least connected to the Zoom still.
All right.
Maybe I should go first while we're waiting for Rich.
yes, why don't you?
All right, I'll do that.
Okay.
Fant, Fant attorney. I represent Retail Energy Supply Association here in Arizona. Got a bunch of things with energy. I worked with the RESA transmission line, SunZia line. Was general counsel for Hoover Dam for 15 years. So good feel for the southwestern power markets. But I did file on behalf of RESA a few weeks ago, a motion to reopen the docket. And that's in 0405, 18-0405. And I can get anybody a copy of that motion to fire up looking at regulated competition again in Arizona. So that is there, and anyone who would be willing to support that effort can get a filing in a docket. That would really help.
Okay.
So
you're looking for comments and support.
yes, because motivation, that I am one, but when there's 20, that causes more interest by So, but anyway, I want to talk about one issue which I think has been misinterpreted, and that's what's the effect of the Bill HB 2101, no problem, and what it did to the powers of the Arizona Corporation Commission in terms of competition. And the short and simple answer is it did nothing. The Arizona Corporation Commission is a constitutional entity under the state of Arizona Constitution. It is not a statutorily created agency, so it enjoys constitutional powers in Arizona. And the powers which relate to regulation of public utility corporations, including electric corporations, will be found in Article 15 of the Arizona Constitution. And Section 3 of that particular section, Article 15, lays out the two specific powers of the ACC. And the first, which is over rate making, is plenary power. Plenary is just a fancy legal term that the ACC has full power over rate making issues and rate making related issues in Arizona. The second issue is over operational standards, et cetera, for regulated utilities. And that is a permissive, called permissive power of the Arizona Corporation Commission. It shares that power with the Arizona State Legislature. But I will point out, as it says in the Constitution, while the legislature has the ability to repeal or override a regulation or a program of the Arizona Corporation Commission, the Arizona legislature does not have the power to reduce the powers of the ACC itself. In Article 15, Section 6, it can increase the powers of the ACC, but it can't reduce the powers of the ACC. So what that means is, if you look at the bill, HB 2101, which repealed a few of the provisions of the competition law, we're like the old Monopoly game, where you draw the card that says, you know, return to go and do not collect $200. We're back to ground zero. And the ACC still retains full power to implement regulated competition in Arizona. Now, I point out, Arizona requires CNCs, I get them mixed up in each state, to be able to participate in the Arizona market. And the Arizona Corporation Commission sets the maximum price range for any competitor in Arizona. So the concern about skyrocketing prices is something the Corporation Commission can't self control. So I think I'll say those things as setups. Working with Shelly, we talked with a number of municipalities yesterday. And before that, I talked with a number of data center developers. And the specific reason is, as you're aware, data centers, the density of the data they handle is going from heavy to heavier. So, for example, an average shelf in a data center when it started maybe 5-6 years ago used 15 kilowatt hours per shelf in a data center daily. Now it's up to about 100 kilowatt hours per shelf. And the density, because of the H100 NVIDIA chips, which required to run AI linked to the cloud and move the data back and forth between these databases, it's quite heavier. If you saw an article earlier today put out by, I think, the president of Southern California Edison, he estimated that electricity demand in California is going to increase in the next 10 years by 82%.
Wow.
And that's before you know, these NVIDIA chips and AI kicks in. Now, AI has another value too, and this is a reason for the competition, because these figures that Mr. Spilkey are going to show don't include the impact of AI on the market. AI in multiple different ways is going to make systems much more efficient. So the savings we show here are really minimum savings, potential savings in Arizona. So that's the key issue is the ACC retains full power right now to work on competition here in Arizona. And that's the position we're advocating to the ACC.
So I want to just comment on that and let Rich take it away, but at the excellent alliance meeting in end of July that Greg hosted, both CEOs for APS and SRP spoke about in excess of 1,000 megawatts of additional load due to AI computations in data centers. And Jeff just asked that they tell their AI, which is so smart, to just not run it on the peak time of like 3 to 7, 8 p.m. So probably could do that. I don't know. But anyway, that was the request. So Rich, you want to take it away?
Yes, I'm on my phone now. Can you guys hear me good enough?
Yes.
Okay, good. I'm glad that's better. I don't know what happened. It was working great for the first couple hours and then all of a sudden. So anyway, I just got a few slides here that I thought I'd share for the benefit of the group. So this first slide, you can see it's been up there for a while, so you've probably looked at it. You know, it's pretty simple, really. We just took a look at Arizona, and if you look at the blue line is simply data. There's no calculation going on with the blue line. The blue line is simply the actual weighted average price or rates that all the folks in Arizona, this is all utilities, all classes of customers, you know, the entire state has paid in cents per kilowatt hour straight from the EIA data website. There's nothing fancy going on with the blue line. The black line is, you know, similar but different. The black line, it's a projection, but basically we looked at the group of competitive states. I showed you that slide earlier that talked about the 14 competitive states compared to the 35 monopoly states that exist in the country. And so we added all 14 of the competitive states together, and we just took, you know, the big giant weighted average of all 14 of them included together and looked at their price trajectory over this period of time. So Arizona did what Arizona did, that's the blue line. But if Arizona would have followed the same price trajectory as the competitive states as a group, they would have followed the black line, hypothetically. And so the difference between the price performance, comparing those things, you can see is significant, and it adds up to about $18 billion over this period of time. And we could break it out between residential and non-residential and do all that, but for the sake of, you know, where we are right now, I just left it at, you know, all sector. So that's a comparison. So in other words, the point is, if Arizona would have been behaving like the competitive states, they probably would have been better off. This is another slide that does get more into the detail on the residential and the commercial. So like on the left-hand side, that's the group of the 14 competitive states and what their price performance has been over this period of time. We also group the monopoly states together. So Arizona is one of the 35 monopoly states that's included in the middle section of the monopoly state group. And then there's Arizona itself. So actually Arizona has done better price performance wise than have the majority of the monopoly states. So they're doing better than average, but clearly they're not doing anywhere near as well as the competitive states are doing. And, you know, this slide also addresses an interesting thing. You know, I've heard a lot, I didn't hear it today, but I have heard it in other places, and maybe you guys have heard it. You know, a lot of people say sometimes that, well, you know, the industrials and the big customers will benefit from retail choice and the residential customers will be harmed. And clearly that's not true. I mean, if you look at the red residential, you know, sections here that are highlighted on the slide, yes, the residential prices in the competitive states have risen by 20.6% over this period of time. That's true, that's what the slide says. But in the monopoly states, they've done 42.9%. So the residential customers in the monopoly states are doing, you know, almost double worse percentage-wise from a price performance perspective. The, you know, business customers, the commercial customers, the industrial customers that are shown here, yes, they are doing better. So the question is not, you know, one side being harmed and the other side benefiting. Everybody's benefiting in the competitive states, but granted, the business customers are benefiting more. You know, when people say that, I think maybe they're thinking about a monopoly model where you have a revenue requirement. And so if you lower the industrial guy's bill by $1, you have to make up by raising the residential people by $1, you know, to make the revenue requirement indifferent. And that is true in a monopoly model. You do got to keep the revenue requirement the same to give the utility the guaranteed rate of return. So it is a zero-sum game. But in the competitive side, it doesn't work that way. Everybody wins. Granted, not everybody wins the same, but everybody wins.
Well, and
from a
point, Rich,
go
at least in Arizona, the way rates used to be is there's some politics involved, and there is some cross subsidization, even though we know that a peaky residential customer is more expensive to serve because they don't have less ability without using energy efficiency to get off peak as much. So when you go to the market as a competitive provider and design rates, if they're more cost based, then, for example, dry cleaning used to return 14-15% rate of return to APS when the regulator gave them a 10% rate of return, because they don't have a voice, and that's just how the cross subsidization went. So in a market-based economy, not only have you showed that everyone wins, there's a little bit more true up of actual cost causation than a political regulatory environment might choose to have in the approved rates. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I agree with everything you said. That's getting more into the weeds. I agree with everything you said, Vicki. You're absolutely right. And those are more of the nuanced benefits. But here, I'm just trying to show on this bar chart, something good is clearly going on in the competitive states. It's not going on in the monopoly states. I guess that's the bottom line. There's a big difference, and it's coming out. So moving on to the environment, I know that's important to a lot of folks in Arizona. This is a little slide we recently put together showing the carbon, or this is not carbon, this is sulfur dioxide, but we have one for carbon too, but it's similar. It's basically showing the reduction in carbon, again, in the competitive state group in green, the monopoly state group in black, and then showing Arizona individually in the orange color. And what's remarkable about this, if you look at the far right, you'll see that the competitive states have actually lowered their carbon emissions a tiny bit more than the monopoly states. And then Arizona itself looks to be almost, identical to the monopoly states, very much in line with the average monopoly state. And the reason that I say this is remarkable, even though the bar charts are not that different from each other, this is remarkable to me because, one, the competitive states have done this without securitization payments to shut down the coal plants early, because the utilities don't own the coal plants in the competitive states, so there are no securitization payments. They've done this without giving a guaranteed rate of return to the monopoly utilities for building, solar and wind facilities. I think it's remarkable. I live in Illinois, and so, just driving around the highways in the adjacent states, it's interesting. There's tons of windmills, tons of solar farms. I know that's happening in a lot of states. But what's interesting is here in Illinois, which is a competitive state, none of the solar facilities and none of the wind facilities are owned by the utilities. They're owned by private investors, trying to get a business rate of return, but not a guaranteed rate of return. Whereas if I drive in Iowa or Wisconsin, nearby Illinois, they have windmills and solar farms too, but those are all, if you look at the nameplate, they're all owned by the incumbent utility with a guaranteed rate of return and the rate base. So the point of this bar chart is to show you that the renewables and the reduction in carbon emissions due to electric generation are happening just as good in the competitive states with market forces rather than the vertically integrated monopoly state model. It's working just as well. My second to last slide is on reliability. So that's already been talked about. So this is a wires reliability statistic. It's called SAIDI. It's one of the electric utility industry's measurements. There's a whole bunch of slides I have on this. I'm only showing you one. We have like 6 of them. But again, we did what we always do. We grouped the monopoly states together, and that's shown in the black bar. We grouped the competitive states together, and that's shown in the green bar. And again, these are the differences between them is not that big. I'm not saying that the competitive states have far superior reliability metrics than the monopoly states. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is they're certainly comparable. And I'm also saying that, again, the fears that people say, oh yeah, your reliability will go out the window if you allow competition. Well, that's not true. The reliability is consistently slightly better, actually, but it's certainly not worse than the monopoly states, you know, and then we got 6 different ways of measuring it. I'm just showing you one. But clearly, the competitive states are on par with the monopoly states from a reliability wires perspective. And then finally, I already showed this slide when Commissioner Thompson was present. But again, this is from a generation reliability or a resource adequacy perspective that I know is important. You know, this is again showing that the competitive states, the group of 14 combined together, are building generation proportional to load growth just as fast, if not faster, than the monopoly states with the guaranteed rate of return model. So that's a generation reliability perspective. So those are my 5 slides. You know, hopefully the data is helpful and informative, and I know we're at time.
Oh, hey, thank you very much. And I think there's other parties here that will find it very useful, and Doug wants to make a comment. We're going to give Shelly a couple minutes and we'll go to our formal meeting. Go ahead, Doug.
Rich raised another critical point.
Yeah.
There's going to be, because of the increased use of energy, there's going to be a massive build out of power required to increase generation to satisfy the growing electrification of our economy.
Mm-hmm.
And here's an opportunity for third parties to come in and pay for it. In the monopoly state, the ratepayers are going to pay for it and see consistently heavy increases in rates to subsidize the monopoly utilities building out a massive build out of electric infrastructure.
Okay, so Rich, thank you. Shelly's here with us, and our screen is still frozen out of some curiosity, but she's captured in a freeze mode there. And
right now.
and she's the lead in Arizona for community choice aggregation, and she just wants to share a couple comments about how that fits in with organized wholesale markets and the retail docket. So take it away, Shelly.
Thank you. So, yes, I'm the State Director of Arizonans for Community Choice, az4cc.org. You want to look this up? And we are focused on, so we are partnering with RESA to open up the market in Arizona and make choice possible. We like the community choice aggregation model, which basically allows a city or county or group of cities to come together and procure or generate their own power, and then provide it to basically anyone within the jurisdictions, residents and businesses, while maintaining a functional partnership with the utilities to continue to deliver the power. So we're not talking about a municipal power. We're talking about just the energy portion of the bundle that is now controlled completely by the utilities. So we've been around for at least 3 years. In fact, Calpine has given us some funding to because Calpine has a division that is devoted to community choice aggregation. So, you know, they see a possible market opportunity in Arizona, so they're helping us. We also recently got a grant from an organization called Physicians for Social Responsibility. And so we use that money to fund a virtual cities tour, where we are meeting the city leaders all around the state. We've met with over half a dozen so far. Yesterday, we held a workshop for the city leaders that we met with. 4 of those cities attended, and we had speakers from California. We had the San Diego mayor, who approved the CCA reluctantly, and now said it's the best decision he ever made. And then we had a smaller city, Lancaster, also talking about the programs that they have invested in. So the CCA, because it's a nonprofit, because it's not beholden to shareholders, any surplus revenues that the CCA generates goes right back into the community to fund energy efficiency and all kinds of energy programs. And the programs at Lancaster, this little city of about 150,000, you know, they gave a grant to the metro to fund electric buses. I mean, they have that kind of capacity to serve the community. So we think this is a great model. And all of the cities that we've met with, because this is Arizona, so we don't take big leaps, all agree that it's worth studying the value of opening up the energy market, of energy choice and community choice energy. So we actually have, I'll wrap this up, we're in a hurry. We have 2 legislators. So besides working with RESA and the ACC and getting them to reopen this docket, we also have 2 legislators, one in the House and one in the Senate, state chambers, that are sponsoring 2 bills that would study feasibility of CCA. Can we save ratepayers money? Can we increase renewable energy? And there's 4 other things, or 2 other things we're going to be studying, but that's basically it. You know, it's to bring all stakeholders to the table and have a dialogue and figure out and do, actually do the due diligence and figure out if it would make a difference to have this model here. We're sort of watching Colorado. They have a similar bill that got passed. Their Public Utilities Commission conducted that study. Now they have an enabling CCA enabling legislation bill, and they have a sponsor. So we're closely watching them as a model for us. But we're pursuing, both parts of the Constitution, whether it's the ACC or the legislature. However we can come by this. We're not fussy. We think, number one, we should be studying this. So that's who we are, and thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, and we appreciate you coordinating with the cities and expressing their interests.
Got that from you.
Yeah, that's right.
Need to show up.
That's right. So they're here through you.
Reminds me, if I can ask this question, one thing I find we run into is, we'll come, but we're not going to say anything. We'll come, but we're not going to put our name on the list. Or we'll come, and that's true of corporations. We spoke, Doug and I facilitated a panel at AFCOM, which is a National Association of Data Center Managers, IT managers. And they said, no, you can do it individually, but not representing our organization. So I find this is kind of, I think it's interesting to hear your thoughts on this, because how do you get these, the people that can move the needle on these things to actually put a stake,
I might say, if you know that one of the top persons is going to submit a letter to the docket.
Yes,
So,
Ryan.
right,
CEBA,
right.
so that
Yeah.
CEBA reals.
It takes time. There's a way to do it.
The CEBA name.
Okay.
Yeah, and you guys can connect afterwards too with ideas.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Because it's 2:00, so our formal meeting's supposed to begin, but I want to make sure if there's any questions for Mike or Rich or Doug on the data that they brought up before we close. Anyone have any other questions? Or you could always, email them like Mike offered. Nope. Okay, well, thank you, everyone. I thought it was some really interesting information, different views shared. Glad APS is digging into it. And so we're going to turn to our formal meeting, and I'm going to start with a quorum. The rest of you don't need to stay. It's about voting and the board and everything, but we'll follow up afterwards. Okay. Thank you for your time.
Yeah.
Take any food you want. Okay, so this is our annual general members meeting, and we're again very happy to have Kelly Snyder here as a new member and already offered a lot of contributions. We want to call this to order, and I think let me just see dues. I know I just see Johnny Key approving. Freeport's right next to me. I did get some checks, so just remember your $250 a year dues are due, so make sure they get to me. We don't have credit card capability, sorry. I don't think I've gotten it yet, but the check could be in the mail. I've heard that before. So we got to first take action at this annual meeting to appoint the corporate secretary. I'm going to suggest that it be me unless anybody else really wants to do it. All those in favor of Vicky being the corporate secretary, say aye.
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 Aye. Okay. Oppose? Yeah, just for corporate secretary. It's on the agenda next. Could have been before, but anyway. Okay, oppose? Okay, hopefully I'm going to be recording something that we have class quorum. So in the annual meeting, we have over 5 in 3 of the classes as members. And I just got to have to make sure that we have, let's see, we have Eric and Tyler in the transmission facilities class. And in the IPPs, we have more than 5. I saw Nick here, Jennifer, Let's see, we've got Greg here and we've got Pete on. And then that'll be Kelly's group. So we have more than 5 there. And on the end users, we've got, I think I saw Ian on here. Yes. And then Johnny Key sitting next to me. So,
Alex.
oh, and Alex with Walmart. Sorry, Alex with Walmart. Well, Alex is here, yes. And then Mona, I know wasn't going to be here, but she had Matthew listen in for her. So I believe that that's we've got 3 classes of 5 or more, so that's a quorum in the classes. All right. Now, members quorum, we've got 3 of 5 classes with over 50% present, so we've made that quorum. And when we go to the board meeting, we'll make sure, but I just went over the board members, so it looks like we have a quorum there as well. Oh, and Greg had Bass had called in, so he's one of the members as well.
That's right. I am present, Vicki.
Yes, very good. I see you present. All right, so this will be pretty quick. We just need to elect the 2023 Board of Directors, class chairs, and members chair. That's a little awkward with Zoom, but what we've done at the past successfully, because it hasn't taken too long, is each class goes separately. And in the transmission class, Eric and Tyler, you can decide, well, let's see whose term is up. It would be Eric's term is up. So you've got to decide if he has a replacement or if he's going to run again. And you all get to vote on Eric's continued tenure, I would assume. So are you all here to do that?
Just there.
Yeah,
Just
this is Tyler. I'm online.
Eric's there.
Yes, I'm here as well.
Okay, Eric, are you willing to continue your term?
Yes, I am.
Okay, good. So the 2 of you, you want to vote for Eric to continue his term? All those in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, there's no opposition. Welcome aboard. Let me go back to the members chair because I didn't do that yet, and that's actually on the members list ahead. Greg Patterson is currently the members chair. That's over all the groups, the 5 groups. So my question is, Greg, are you willing to continue to serve, or does somebody else want to? Are you willing?
Sure.
Okay, Greg will continue to serve unless someone else wants to jump in there. Anyone else want to be members chair? No? Okay, everybody gets to vote on this. All those in favor of Greg continuing for another year as members chair, say aye.
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 Wasn't very overwhelming, Greg. Opposed? Okay, Greg, you're in. Okay, Greg here. All right, the load serving entities class is vacant because we don't have active competition, so there's no one really competing with the utilities to be a local load serving entity. The aggregators class does not have 5 members. So what we've done with regard to appointing directors there is we wait until the board meeting and then the board can fill in the aggregators class where Mona and Alex are members. Alex is a director longer, but I know Mona expressed interest in rerunning, and so we will take that up at the board meeting that follows this. Now in the IPP and wholesale marketers class, Nick is up. I don't know, Nick, if you want to continue to serve or if Kelly wants to jump in or anyone else. You guys can have a little discussion here. The IPP.
Yeah, this is Nick. I'm fine continuing on if needed. I'm fine doing it.
You don't want to like try to.
My colleague Jack is gonna be only here.
Okay. We just gotta make sure whoever's your official one is here because we don't allow people to vote for their peer for their peer. It's a bylaws rule.
Bylaws don't allow proxy voting.
That's a better way to put it. So whoever is going to call in, just let me know and I'll put them in for EDP, Jack, maybe. Okay. Okay, then if Nick's willing to continue and no one else in your group is jumping in to displace him, all those in favor of Nick Gilmore of Tenaska serving another it's a 2-year term actually, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. All those opposed? All right, Nick, you're in. Look how easy that was.
Hooray.
Woo. Okay, going to the end use customers. Ian's term is up, and so I don't know if anyone else wants to run in his place or if Ian's willing to do it. So you guys need to talk amongst yourself. I know Court was on the phone. I don't know if he is now. He's gone now, and Mark isn't here. He was going to be, but Johnny's still an active director. His term ends next year. Anyone else want to replace Ian? Ian, are you willing to stay on?
I would be honored to, Vicky.
Honored. Okay. Yes, quite the honor. Anyone else want to contest him? No? Okay, all those in favor of Ian re-upping him for another 2-year term, say aye.
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 Okay, all those opposed? You're in, Ian. Okay,
Right
look how
on.
easy that was. All right. Okay, let me pull up the minutes from the last annual meeting. That's not it. And then you can look at them real quickly. We don't have Kevin here anymore. And he was the one that always scrutinized all the minutes. So let me see where that is. Just a second. It's not in that one, unfortunately. Hang on. I had them up, but if anyone has the minutes handy, they can just pull them right up, but I'll get them otherwise. I thought I had those. All right. It doesn't look like they're in here. Sorry about this. I had them. Okay, here we go. Doing anything? It's not cooperating with me. There we go. Okay, here we go. Here's the document. All right, let me expand that. All right, I'll let you look through it and I will just give you a minute. It's pretty short. So if anyone has comments after you read them, let me know. Otherwise, we're going to vote to approve these minutes. No comments? Someone needs to move and a second to approve. Shy group.
Vicky, it's Jennifer. I'll move to approve.
Okay, all right. All right, all those in favor of approving the minutes from the last, actually, you know what I did? You can't approve those. That is for the Board of Directors meeting. I made a goof, but we'll come back to those. Here we go. This would be the right document. This one's probably a little longer. Here, let's look at this. You guys can move again in a minute. All right, I'll give you a couple minutes on this page. It's pretty short. Okay. Hoping you're looking at this, see if there's any comments. Any comments? Okay, let's try that again. Jennifer, you want to move?
So
I'll move to approve.
That's that last year's annual meeting minutes.
Yeah, last year's annual meeting minutes.
Or no. That's the Board of Directors. We're going to go. Oh, yeah, that's the one. Actually, keep that up and you can share it. That's the one we're going to approve at the Board of Directors meeting. Okay, this is from last year's annual members meeting. That's where I goofed. Okay. All right, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, Johnny's seconding. Now, all those in favor of approving the annual members meeting minutes from last year, say aye.
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 Okay. Any nays? Okay, now we got that approved.
Just
Okay.
offer to remove the word draft.
Yes, I will remove the word draft and because we post these on the website too, once they're approved. Okay, so the next annual meeting will be next September, hopefully a date that's not an open meeting date. So is there any other members discussion before we move to the board meeting? No? Well, we were very efficient. Okay, it's adjourned at 2:14. We could add more speakers go on for it. Okay, we're gonna go jump right to the board meeting. You can stay or not, but may as well stay, it won't be long. Okay, you have the minutes up, right?
And the name of them is AZISA 51123.
Yep, I know. Let me go back because this is September and that's not the one I want. So let me go to. You could share it, probably. You had just had it
I'm
up.
not in the meeting.
Oh, okay. All right, never mind. Okay, let's see. The last one was May. I just had that. May. Where's May?
Up here.
Here we go. I think it's right here. But it's not in there. It should be. It makes no sense. No, I had them. Okay, let me do that. AZISA 511. AZISA 511. Yes, but I don't think my document's in there.
But it has a space. Find it. Just type in 51123.
51123. Ha! You're so smart.
One on the left.
There we go. Thank you. Gosh, if only you had organized my stuff too.
I'll
John.
tell you, I save everything with the year, then the month, then the day, then the American volume for that reason.
All right, so here we go. We have found the draft minutes from the last Board of Directors meeting, but I didn't actually call it to order. I'm calling it to order. And I called it to order at 2:14. I first need to be appointed the corporate secretary. All those in favor of me being the corporate secretary for the Board of Directors meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, good. Nobody wants to do it. All right, a quorum. Let's see. We should have a quorum. Let me go back to the Zoom. Right.
Those are the same ones as last time.
Yeah, we should have got Tyler, Johnny, Eric, and Greg. Do we have, and with me, we only need 6 of 9. Are we counting?
Are you counting me, Vicky? Jennifer?
So we have 1, 2. Yeah. 2, 3, 4. 5, 6, 7. We should be good. 7 of 9. So we have a quorum. Now we can go back to approving the.
Sure, you want to write down who is here, so you have that for your notes.
Yeah, I better. Let me do that. Eric, yes. Yes. Yes, thank you.
Alex.
Alex. Jen. Okay, got it. Thank you, because I will go back and do those. All right, so let me go to share screen. There we go. Okay, that was painful enough. All right, let's look at these. This was very simple, these draft minutes from the board meeting. I don't know if you want to look at them again. Anybody have any comments? No. Okay. Motion to approve.
Motion.
Okay, Donnie. Anybody else want a second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor of approving the May 11th, 2023 board meeting minutes, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, they're approved. All right, now we need to go back to the aggregators class that only has Enel in it and Texas Retail Energy and Scott Olson with NRG. So they don't have 5 members, so that's why they cannot elect their own directors independently. The whole board has to do it. And Mona is up for re-election. She was serving a 1-year term, I believe, 1 year. No, should be 2 years, but anyway, her term is up. So my question is, does anyone else want to serve as director in the aggregators class? Otherwise, she communicated she would continue to do so. Anyone else? Nope. Okay, so then the whole board gets to vote on this. All those in favor of Mona serving another 2-year term, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, she'll be so pleased. She's in. All right. Okay, now, I don't know if we want to talk about any other business here in that there were some questions about how to communicate information to the commissioners on the open dockets for the RTO and or the retail choice docket. That was something that came up. Any other business, how the AZISA can best serve going forward, any kind of dockets or action you want us to really focus on behalf of the members? Don't be this quiet. Come on, this group, it has opinions.
I mean. Well, sure, it is. Yeah, I'll pick up the Kevin Higgins mantle from years ago. Is there enough consensus on the group? I mean, we've got utility folks in here, we've got other folks in here, and I think you're going to get some different opinions on how RTO should go. You're going to get different opinions on retail access. So traditionally, the AISA hasn't been able to be an advocate for really either one.
Correct. I'm just sharing information.
So
Yep.
I don't know what information you would docket that individual members couldn't.
Yeah, I don't think there
Yeah,
is.
so I
Yeah.
don't see a reason for the AISA to actually docket anything.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
And I wasn't meaning that. I meant from the members, how they would want the information they need to do what they want to do via the AZISA. Because I try to bring different opinions and information to help us move organized markets forward. Yeah.
Well, I think you've got, I mean, super sophisticated members with a lot of resources who really pay attention on this stuff, and they, to the extent that they want to participate in the RTO or the retail access docket, I mean, they'll file what they want to file, and they also read those dockets. So I don't really expect you to comb through them and give us summaries or anything.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
That sounds great.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't envision really any need for any of that.
Okay.